Hi, and welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Podcast. Today I want to ask you, are you able to tell people what you did is wrong? Or are you still trying to be nice and not cause waves? This is Kale Houser. Thank you so much for joining me for the Kale Houser Leadership Podcast. Today we're going to talk about being able to tell people what you did is wrong. And if we're able to do that, or if we're still too concerned about being nice or simply don't want to cause waves and just ignore it and bury our heads in the sand. So ultimately this comes down to accountability. This is stemming from a recent conversation my wife and I had, something that just happened that brought this to light in the form of being able to tell somebody when they've done something legitimately wrong. And I'm not talking about mistakes like, oh, whoops, I just accidentally filed that in the wrong place or anything like that. I'm talking about when somebody has done something that is legitimately wrong, whether it be socially, morally, it goes against your core values as a corporation or a company, anything of that nature. So my wonderful wife, Liz, she has a deployment support group for spouses of deployed members that she's been working and been involved with for a long time. And it's where spouses and girlfriends of deployed military members can come and get support and find resources and things of that nature. And as you can imagine, it's quite active right now. So it is early March and we're in the middle of the Ukraine-Russia conflict and what's going on with that. So as you can imagine, a lot of Guard folks are getting called up from their civilian jobs, whether it be for training, advanced pre-deployment stuff, or actual deployments. I'll leave that to whatever's happening with each individual state. But as you can imagine, it creates turmoil with the spouses at home, whether they're leaving families or girlfriends, things of that nature, especially for people that are first-time guardsmen that are getting called up, as well as active duty. That's happening as well. There are units, I'm sure, that are in pre-deployment training or final equipment and all that kind of good stuff. But if you don't know, the military is a machine just like any other corporation. Although take your average profitable corporation, take away that desire for profitability and growth and just leave the bureaucracy and the red tape, and that's what the military is, okay? So anything you do, there's layers to getting it done. It's never a simple process. And certainly pay is no exception. So there was a gal in her group, a spouse of a military member, that kind of went on to the group to get support. Like, hey, the military still hasn't processed my husband's paycheck. We're still not getting paid for, the presumption is that he was activated on active duty orders instead of Guard orders to do this training or pre-deployment, whatever the case may be. It kind of doesn't matter. But the process had not flowed through the finance department in order for them to actually get their income and their paycheck that they are entitled to. So she was looking for support in this group. No big deal. It's kind of the intent of the group. Like, hey, go talk to this person, or has this been done? Whatever the case may be. There's a lot of experience in the group from gals that have gone through this process before, including my wife. But what it came to light is there was another lady in the group that was in my wife's group that had taken a screenshot of that, because evidently she took offense that this gal would post about, from my understanding, kind of relying on. Why are you as a woman relying on your husband's paycheck? You should be able to take care of yourself. So she took a screenshot of this gal, which was really just, in all honesty, seeking support and help, and then proceeded to post it in other groups making fun of her and kind of, belittling her and really just being nasty about the whole thing, right? Really a gossip, for lack of a better term, and not really even a nice gossip for quotes on that. So this is entirely inappropriate behavior. This isn't a mistake. This isn't I was talking to my neighbor. This is putting this screenshot out on public view in these other groups for the sole purpose of making fun and belittling, right? So the act of screenshotting and sharing itself is kind of the no-no, right? You just kind of, those goes against social norms. You don't really do that, especially without that person's permission. But to further use it to slander and degrade that person is really absolutely unacceptable. So once Liz found out about it, she decided, as I think most of us would, that the offender, the gal that had taken the screenshot and was doing those things, was removed from the deployment support group and blocked from joining again, right? which is totally, I think, an appropriate situation, because it kind of shows the colors of, and that gal wasn't there for the right reasons, right? She wasn't there to offer support. She wasn't there to get support. She was there really just to try, I guess, make herself feel better by putting other people down, right? That dichotomy. But here's the lesson in today's podcast for you, right? When you're, as the leaders of your organization, faced with a similar situation, when somebody has done something legitimately wrong, and of course, I'm not talking about illegal or anything like that, like, oh, my CFO is stealing from us, so, I just let it go, or, because now that becomes a matter of police and law or FBI, whatever the case may be, law enforcement. But your ability to tell somebody to their face, is that something that you're able to do in something in a situation similar to this, like, and what they did is wrong, without being mean or necessarily being confrontational about it, but just a simple matter of fact that garners no further discussion, like, hey, X, Y, and Z, you did this, and that is wrong, right? That is not acceptable in our organization. And a lot of people are not able to do that. Certainly it is easier, especially if it's not directly towards you or directly impacting the organization, although ultimately it will. It's easier to walk away and just kind of let it sort itself out, right? That's the classic term of, oh, these things just, have a way of handling themselves or fleshing themselves out. And that's typically hardly ever the case. And it may temporarily, absolutely, but what happens the next time, whether that be an hour later, a week later, a month later, a year later, you are going to have to deal with this at some point. And really, the ability to walk up to somebody, especially if they are in your organization, a subordinate to you, and tell them you are wrong for doing this, or even not a subordinate position, peer-to-peer, or even above you, right? It certainly requires a little bit more tact when it's somebody above you in authority. But two things make this possible if you are the leader of your organization. And as we discussed yesterday with clarity of expectation, one is, do you have clear expectations of behavior? Are those set down? Has your team agreed to those as part of your hiring process or your employee handbook, whatever the case may be? As part of working there, they've agreed to these expectations and standards of behavior, and those have to be crystal clear, as we discussed yesterday. Without clarity, you create confusion, and confusion leads to failure, right? And that's what we're talking about. And two, the second part of this, besides the clarity of your expectations, is, are you willing to hold people accountable to those expectations, right? So those are the two critically key parts of this. And there is an additional subtle aspect that we want to be aware of, and that is how to tactfully do so, right? And how to kindly correct somebody. First of all, you have to have the self-awareness of the situation to know when it's happened and know how to appropriately respond to that. And sometimes it does require a more stern correction versus a correction of behavior that's more gentle and instructional in nature. That is entirely up to you as far as you handle that situation and your ability to read the situation and the intent of that person, right? There's a difference between an employee or a team member that's being belligerent or purposely underhanded versus somebody that kind of maybe gets caught up in the moment. They're dealing with other issues, and that cannot be underestimated as well, is how people react when they're dealing with other issues, right? So maybe her husband was going through a hard deployment, or boyfriend, or just broke up, whatever the case may be going on with her, and she was using this as a form to kind of cope with that, right? So you have to be aware of all those situations, which is the great thing about being the leader of your organization, is you kind of never really know what's going on with all your people unless you start getting involved, unless you have that connection with them to where they trust you and you kind of know what's going on, right? So that's kind of the basics of relationships. So this is kind of this interesting thing that jumped up on us all of a sudden that I wanted to talk about, because I think it is very important, the ability to tell somebody what you did is wrong, right? It doesn't have to be like, what you did is wrong. It's simply a statement of fact, and that could be, what you did is wrong. Here's why it's wrong. If you didn't realize it was wrong, but most likely they know it's wrong, right? There are standards of behavior that are pretty much accepted socially, no matter what scenario you're in, and when those are violated, people know it, and they just hope they're going to get away with it, or nobody catches them, right? So, are you willing to be that leader that is confident enough in yourself to be able to address those issues versus letting them fester, right? Because ultimately, other people in your organization sees that behavior, and they will see that you're not handling that behavior or addressing it, which just further undermines their confidence in you. It further undermines your ability to inspire your team to greatness, right? To be productive. Because again, right, confusion creates failure. No clarity creates confusion, and ultimately creates failure and no productivity as that goes. So that's what I wanted to generally talk about today and put on the forefront of your brain of when you see something that's just not right. This is an extension of the see something, say something, but with a step further of it's your responsibility as the leader of your organization, or if you want to be the leader of your organization, that you have to say something, you have to address it. Don't let your personal timidity, if that's the case, get in your way, or your desire that it'll just naturally flesh itself out, get in your way. Make sure you're addressing it. And if this is something, these are great situations to role play with other people, how to handle those situations before you get into them. A role play scenario, whether you have a fellow coworker, a spouse, or if you decide to join Kale Houser Leadership, our coaching program, we offer that as well, the opportunity to role play these different scenarios and get a chance to really explore, well, how would I react in a situation like this instead of in the heat of the moment, whether you let emotions take control or whatnot. But I did want to address kind of switching topics a little bit. So some of you may not know me very well, and just kind of a snippet of Kale Houser. Air Force officer, started as enlisted, transferred, got my degree and my commission. My training by academia is mechanical engineering from University of Hawaii. Admittedly not the most top-notch engineering school in the country, but they are accredited, and I did graduate. I really haven't done much with that degree, although I enjoy the concepts of mechanical engineering, and it kind of helps you see things in a different light as you walk about the world. Then ultimately became an MQ-9 pilot with Air Force Special Operations Command, and did that for the last couple of years. And that's really where a preponderance of my experiences with leadership come from, right? In the operational world. It was the chance for my opportunity to do some real-time leading of small teams that were under my charge, both officially, like no kidding, under G-Series command orders, where I had actual UCMJ authority, as well as just informally, whether it be small teams or exercises, things of that nature. So we're going to be talking about that a lot over the coming days and weeks, and I'll try to share those things with you. But I want to really touch base with you today and get you thinking about the best way that you can approach people when you see things that need to be corrected. So I hope you got some value out of this today. Please, it would help me tremendously if you would give a little heart or a like, whatever you're listening to on, whether it be Apple Podcasts or Castbox or whatever else you may be listening on today, or on YouTube. Subscribe so you get notified when I drop new episodes. I'm going to try to do one pretty much every day, every afternoon. And if anything else, drop me a message at kalehouserleadership.com with your questions or a topic that you're struggling with or you want to talk about, and I'll be happy to do so. Hey, stay great. I hope you have a fantastic afternoon, no matter where you're at in the world. Bye.